In this video tutorial, we'll show you how to sew the Palma dress from start to finish. We'll show you how to make it without sleeves, but you can add sleeves, for example our T-sleeves, which looks like this. Start by overlocking or zigzagging all raw edges. On the center front piece of the bodice, fold the neckline edge down against the wrong side by 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch. Press the edge flat with an iron. The edge of the bodice will be sewn in place with a top stitch later. Place the center front piece of the bodice with the right side facing up. Lay the side front pieces on top with the right side facing down against the center front piece. Pin the front pieces together from the waist up to the notch on the side front piece. Sew the pieces together with a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowance flat. Now we're going to make the corners of the two front skirt pieces. Fold 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch to the wrong side along the entire bottom edge and both vertical edges of the skirt. Press flat. Fold the front piece in the middle of the diagonal cut corner, bringing the right sides together so the cut corner aligns in the center. Sew along the folded corner with a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Cut away the seam allowance close to the corner to get a neat edge when folded. Repeat the process for the other corner. Turn the corners right side out and fold the remaining edge up by 2 cm or 3/4 of an inch. Press the corners and edge sharply along the fold and pin in place. The folded edges will be sewn with a top stitch later. Now attach the bodice to the skirt, which has two front pieces. The skirt's edges are already folded to hide the raw edges. Lay the bodice right side up. Place skirt front piece 1 on top, right side down, matching the side seam and notches. Then place skirt front piece 2 on top, also right side down, matching the side seam and the notches. Sew the skirt front pieces to the bodice with a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance at the waist. Press the seam allowance down towards the skirt. To create a strong elastic edge on the center back piece, sew a casing. Take the center back piece and fold the top edge down by 1.5 centimeters or half an inch towards the wrong side. Stitch 1.2 centimeters or just less than half an inch from the edge on the right side to form the casing. You can insert the elastic in the casing now or after you've sewn the elastic smocking in the next step. Now it's time to make the smocked section. It's created using elastic thread in the bobbin while sewing back and forth from the right side of the fabric. Start by marking lines with tailor's chalk on the right side of the center back piece, spacing them 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch apart from the top edge down to the notch. Manually wind the elastic thread onto the bobbin, not too tight and not too loose. Test what works best for your machine. Insert the bobbin into the sewing machine and bring the elastic thread up through the needle plate. Set the stitch length to 4 and increase the thread tension. Sew from the right side, using regular thread as the top thread and elastic thread as the bobbin thread. Stitch along each marked line without cutting the thread. When reaching the end of a line, lift the presser foot, turn the fabric, lower the foot, and continue sewing the next line. Repeat this process until all lines are sewn. In the casing at the top edge, insert a piece of 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch white elastic through the casing. The length of your elastic should be around half the width of your center back piece when it's tightened in the end. To keep the elastic in place, it may help to sew it down at both ends before attaching the center back piece to the back bodice pieces. Steaming the smock panel with an iron will help the smocking tighten slightly. Now attach the skirt back pieces to the bodice back pieces. Lay the side back pieces of the skirt right sides up, then place the back pieces of the bodice right side down on top and sew them together with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Place the center back piece with the smocking right side up. Position each side back piece facing down on either side of the center back piece. Align the notches on the bodice back piece with the elastic edge of the center back piece. Sew the back pieces together using a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Place the front and back pieces together, aligning the shoulder seams, and sew them together with a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Press the seam allowance open with an iron. Now fold 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch of fabric at the neckline to the wrong side. Press the edge flat with an iron and pin it in place. To finish the neckline, sew a top stitch all the way around the edges from the right side. Start sewing at the waist on the back piece where the skirt and bodice are joined. With a 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, sew all the way up to the neckline, around the neckline, and down until you reach the waist on the opposite back piece where the bodice and skirt are joined. If the dress is going to have sleeves, now is the time to head over to the sleeve tutorial and come back to this video afterwards. If the dress will be sleeveless, you can continue watching this tutorial. Now we're going to sew the side seams. Here I'm sewing the side seam with sleeves. Place the front piece of the dress right side up and lay the back piece on top with the right side down. Sew all the way from the outer edge of the sleeve to the armhole where the sleeve meets the dress and continue down along the side of the dress to the bottom edge. Make sure to match the seam under the sleeve and the seam where the bodice and skirt are joined before you begin sewing. If your dress is sleeveless, then sew the side seams from the armhole to the bottom edge with a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure to match the seam where the bodice and skirt are joined before you start sewing. Press the seam allowance open and flat with an iron. If your dress is not going to have sleeves, you will now need to sew facings into the armholes to finish the edge. Sew both ends of a front-facing piece to a back-facing piece, right sides together. Press the seam allowance open. Repeat for the other armhole facing and make sure to mark the front and back sides of the fabric. Turn the dress right side out. Place the facing on the outside of the dress's armhole with the right side of the facing against the right side of the dress. Ensure that the shoulder seams on both pieces match. Sew all the way around the armhole with a 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Trim the seam allowance by making small notches in all areas where the seam curves. Turn the facing to the inside of the dress. Iron the edge flat and sew the facing to the dress with a top stitch 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around. Now it's time to hem the dress. You've already folded the edge of the front piece. Now fold the remaining skirt edge the same way. First fold 1 cm or 3/8 of an inch to the wrong side and press it flat. Then fold another 2 cm or 3/4 of an inch to the wrong side and press it flat again. Top stitch 1.8 cm or just less than 3/4 of an inch from the edge to secure the fold. Start sewing at the seam where the bodice and skirt meet at the front and continue until you reach the opposite seam where the skirt and front piece are joined. And that's it. We hope you like your Palma dress.